Tonight on Politicat, heightened tensions between Israel and Gaza. We look at the aftermath of this week's missile strikes.
And how will the new head of ICE affect U.S. southern border policies?
Plus, a woman forced to give birth alone in a Florida jail.
Those stories and more tonight on Politicat.
It's your politics right now. Good evening and welcome to Politicat. I'm Joey Safchuk.
And I'm Justin Sweet with lots of news to get to this week, so let's get into it. One person is dead and 7 are injured after a shooting at a Colorado school earlier today. 2 suspects are in custody. Law enforcement responded to the STEM school Highlands Ranch around 2 p.m. They are currently looking into the possibility of a 3rd suspect. Of the 7 people injured at the middle school, several were taken to the hospital and are in critical condition. The school is just 8 miles from Columbine High School, the site of a 1999 mass shooting.
Today, the White House ordered former counsel Don McGahn not to hand subpoenaed documents over to Congress. McGahn was the most cited witness in the Mueller report. Special counsel Robert Mueller especially relied on his answers for the section on obstruction of justice. House Judiciary Chairman Jerry Nadler subpoenaed McGahn last month for testimony and documents. The move is part of the panel's investigation into possible obstruction of justice.
Myanmar released 2 Reuters journalists from prison yesterday. The 2 were arrested in late 2017 for revealing a military-led massacre of 10 Rohingya Muslims. Journalists Wa Lone and Cho Sa-u were sentenced to 7 years in prison in September under a colonial-era state secrets law. After years of international pressure, they were released as part of a mass presidential amnesty. Both received the Pulitzer for international reporting last month.
In Venezuela, opposition leader Juan Guaido said yesterday that he would, quote, evaluate all options to force President Nicolas Maduro out of office, including considering asking for the U.S. to intervene militarily. Last week, he led a series of unsuccessful mass protests in an attempt to oust Maduro. The Trump administration says all options are on the table, but experts say a U.S. military presence on the ground in Venezuela could escalate the conflict.
Over the weekend, Gaza fired more than 600 projectiles across the border into Israel. Some were intercepted by Israel's missile defense system, the Iron Dome, but 4 civilians were killed and nearly 80 injured in the rocket fire. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu announced Israel retaliated by striking more than 350 critical targets across Gaza. 27 Palestinians were killed in the largest display of violence between Israel and Gaza since 2014. Yesterday, the 2 sides agreed to a ceasefire after Egypt, Qatar, and the United Nations helped broker a deal. And with that, I'd like to welcome our panel to join us. Joining us is Edmund Bannister of the NU Political Union and James Crisafulli of NU College Democrats. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having us.
Now I'll start with you. Just last month, Netanyahu won re-election despite impending corruption indictments, and this week stated, quote, the campaign is not over, it demands patience. What do you think is the best strategy for Israel and Netanyahu moving forward?
Well, I think right now he's being emboldened. He just received a mandate via this election, and he's receiving substantial backing from Trump right now. So he feels like he can do anything in his power to suppress Hamas, to suppress the Palestinian Authority, and right now for him that he has no real checks on his power.
Edmund?
I mean, I think we're in a stage right now where there's not a lot of energy amongst the Israeli voting public for a peace deal with the Palestinians. Ever since 2005, when Ariel Sharon withdrew Israeli troops from the Gaza Strip, the Israelis have been taught a lesson that if you withdraw from a place that you're occupying, all that will happen will be that Hamas moves in soon after. And every time one of these conflicts happen, it just reinforces that point. So I think we're looking at a stage of Israeli-Palestinian relations where there's not a lot of progress being made on peace at all.
Now, President Trump has fostered, if you will, a relationship with Netanyahu that many Israeli supporters and Israelis themselves see as beneficial, but many Democrats, including 2020 contenders, have said Netanyahu is racist and corrupt. So what role is this going to play in the 2020 election and within the Democratic race?
Well, I think it's important that the United States always has a relationship with Israel. If Benjamin Netanyahu is the person that the Israeli people elect, then that's the person whoever our president is has to deal with. I think that definitely both Democrats and Republicans generally support Israel. It's a bipartisan issue. Benjamin Netanyahu is corrupt in many different ways, but as long as he's Prime Minister of Israel, he has to be someone that the United States is willing to work with.
I completely agree. I would just push back a little bit on the bipartisanship. I think we're starting to see some divides in that area. A recent Pew poll came out saying that more of the U.S. Jewish community than of the Christian community says that U.S. support for Israel is actually going too far. So I think there's a lot of energy in the U.S. right now behind criticizing some of U.S. actions for Israel. But I definitely agree that Israel is a really important ally in the Middle East, in Syria, and in a lot of those conflicts. So we have to be willing to work with whoever's in power.
Now, Edmund, you just said that whoever is prime minister in Israel is who the Americans are going to have to deal with. The 2020 Democrat contender Pete Buttigieg said that supporting Israel doesn't necessarily mean he has to support Netanyahu or his politics. Do you think that stance could hurt the Democrats if they want to win the presidency?
I think Buttigieg is right by saying that you don't need to get involved in Israeli politics or support a particular Israeli politician in order to have a positive relationship with that country. I think that Trump has tried to politicize this issue, especially with the decision to move the American embassy to Jerusalem. That was something that was perceived as being perhaps maybe a little bit aggressive, especially in the current climate. I think that Democrats and Republicans differ on some points vis-a-vis Israeli policy, but I think that whoever the president is after 2020 will want to have a relationship with the Israeli prime minister.
Now, James, it's one thing to say that you don't necessarily support the man in office, but it's another thing to vocally be against him, as many candidates have done. Do you think the very anti-Netanyahu stance, rather than just not pro-Netanyahu, is going to hurt Democrats?
Well, I think it's important, and I think that it might, get some backlash from some Democratic supporters. But to be honest, I don't think this is going to be a very important issue in 2020 for the Democrats in terms of hurting them or helping them electorally. I think there's a lot more issues that that the voters are going to prioritize over this. So while it's important, I don't think it'll really affect the election.
And what do you make of Trump's support for Netanyahu? What do you think that does to his base and to the opposition?
Yeah, I think it's a really interesting calculation for Trump in terms of his base. I think it certainly emboldens Netanyahu on his side, but on President Trump's side, I'm not exactly sure what the calculation is and what the calculus is for his voters. I think we've seen a pattern of President Trump supporting people that he sees as authoritative and as strong leaders abroad, and I think he continues that with his support for Netanyahu.
I mean, I think that Trump definitely is able to energize a particular segment of his base, especially evangelical Christians, by hyping up the issue over Israel. But again, I don't think it resonates. I would agree that it doesn't resonate that much with the average American voter. Both sides are going to say that they're generally supportive of Israel, and I think 2020 is going to be decided on different issues.
All right, thanks so much, Edmund, and don't go anywhere. We'll be right back with more Politicat.
At Northwestern,
he continue?
He said if he doesn't go on too long.
Every way.
Northwestern break right through that. With our colors flying, we will cheer you all to go. Go you Northwestern, fight for victory, sweet victory, for the fame of our fair name, and go Northwestern, win that game. Go Cats!
The former head of the Border Patrol is now the director of ICE. President Trump nominated Mark Morgan, who was chief of Border Patrol under President Obama, to lead U.S. immigration and customs enforcement. Morgan supports the border wall, and Trump tweeted Morgan told him to, quote, stay the course on the president's current immigration goals, which have been some of his signature talking points since his campaign. The nomination comes after the resignation of Department of Homeland Security Secretary Kirstjen Nielsen and her successor, as well as the withdrawal of Trump's old ICE nomination last month. We're going to welcome back our panel to talk more about this. Why do you think that there have been so many shakeups in this department?
Well, I think it's actually pretty extraordinary that Trump fired Kirstjen Nielsen because she wasn't radical enough for him. she was lambasted, especially by the left, for being incredibly, insensitive about the issue of detaining migrant families and separating migrant children from their parents. That she apparently was not hard enough on this issue for Donald Trump, and so he's brought in this new person. I think it's extraordinary what the Trump administration is doing. They say they want to cut down on migrant flows, and yet at the same exact time they've cut off aid to Guatemala, Honduras, and El Salvador, which is only going to make the violence in those places worse and the government's more unstable. There's nothing coherent about the Trump administration's policy right now.
Yeah, I agree, especially with the aid policy. It makes no sense. But I think, yeah, President Trump sees immigration as a winning issue for his base, and he's trying to capitalize on that. But ever since the detaining of migrant families and children and the separation of families, he's been trying to figure out a way that he can turn this into an issue that his base can get behind, and that has resulted in a complete internal just chaos within the department.
Now, this administration has faced legal and moral challenges to their policy of family separation and threats to shut down the border completely. Do you think these new leaders will be forced to step back to avoid a conflict with the courts?
Yeah, I think that's the best defense against some of the administration's policies right now is being challenged in the courts. Except we just saw, actually about half an hour ago, the Ninth Circuit said that the Trump policy of making asylum seekers return to Mexico or go to Mexico while they await their asylum trial, it will be allowed to stay. So the courts are an important avenue, but I think we're seeing that sometimes that they will agree with his administration.
I think ultimately, in addition to the courts, the fact that there's a democratically controlled House of Representatives is a big issue. Trump can't get the appropriations for something like the border wall without going through Congress. He's tried by kind of siphoning funds away from places like FEMA, but it doesn't seem to be too successful, and there's not a whole lot of construction going on the border wall. Especially as the 2020 race ramps up, there's no conceivable way that Trump is going to be able to deliver on that promise of a border wall before the next election. So I think for now, what he wants to do is he wants to up the rhetoric and blame the Democrats for the fact that it hasn't been successful.
Any thoughts on Democratic cooperation from Congress?
Yeah, I think there's going to be a lot of blaming and blame shifting leading up to 2020. I think that Democratic congressmen will most likely try to fix the asylum system in any way they can, but President Trump will veto any legislation likely.
Yeah, I think that ultimately it's going to come down to the voting public to basically, decide which way this issue is going to go. I think that if Trump gets reelected, he's going to be able to accomplish a lot of his goals, perhaps not a 1,500 mile wall along the Mexican border, but perhaps, blocking asylum requests. That's definitely something that he could do.
Now, you just mentioned blocking the asylum request, but how is he going to deal with that failed promise if he is unable to build a wall like many people think?
Well,
it's not going to happen.
I think because his rhetoric is so xenophobic and it contrasts so starkly with the Democrats' rhetoric on this issue, even if he isn't successful, he's still going to be able to go to his voters and say, I tried, I was the guy pushing this issue the entire time. Because it's not like he promised this during the campaign and then didn't fight for it. He has been fighting for it very hard. So I think his base is still going to appreciate the fact that he did put in the effort. It's really going to come down to the other side of the aisle and what they managed to bring forward in the election.
Is this going to be a big policy issue in the election on the other side of the aisle as well?
I think it will, and I was just wanted to add, not only he can go to his base and say that he's tried, but I think he's already gone to his base and lied about sections of the border wall that were built before he came into office and said, look at what we're doing at the border. And so his administration is not reliable in terms of what they're going to claim in terms of victory in this situation and on this issue. And I think in 2020 he will try and no doubt claim victory at the border and on immigration and say that he has done more than any other president has, which is in most cases by factually not correct.
I think the Democrats are going to actually try to steer away from the issue of immigration. When they talk about it, I think they're mostly going to talk about child separation and the denial of asylum to desperate people, and couch it in those terms. I don't think they want a broader discussion about the issue, because I generally think that that most Americans agree with the idea that immigration should be legal. And as long as the debate is focused around that idea, Republicans have an advantage. I think the Democrats are going to try to shift the conversation towards essentially, what Trump is doing to the country in a more general sense, and especially economic issues like healthcare that resonate with people in the Midwest who didn't vote for Democrats the last election.
Edmund, do you think the Democrats are going to focus more on what Trump hasn't been able to do, or on what they will be able to do if they're elected?
I think that it depends on which candidate becomes the nominee. There are people like Pete Buttigieg, you mentioned him before, who are really trying to shift the conversation away from Trump and talk about, what is positive about their platforms or their ideas. And there are people who are really, Joe Biden is an example of this, who are really, hinging their campaign on presenting themselves as a more respectable choice, as opposed to, the foamy at the mouth Trump who doesn't respect institutions. So I think it depends on who the nominee is.
I agree. I think Pete Buttigieg, Joe Biden, Beto O'Rourke are some of the candidates that will try and avoid mostly talking about Trump and try to talk about unity and appeal to the more moderate independent voters that they think they can grab. And then some of the more progressive candidates are focusing on Trump and saying, our country is going in the wrong direction and I want to turn it around.
All right, we're going to leave it right there. We'll be right back with more Politicat.
At Northwestern, we're Wildcats in every way.
Go Northwestern, break right through that. With our colors flying, we will cheer you all to go. Go you Northwestern, fight for victory, sweet victory, for the fame of our fair name, and go Northwestern, win that game. Go Cats!
At Northwestern University, we are pioneering innovation and achieving excellence across every imaginable discipline. At Northwestern University, the possibilities are endless.
And we have another breaking update coming in this evening. The New York Times is reporting that President Donald Trump's businesses lost $1.17 billion from the late 80s to the early 90s, according to tax documents. The report contrasted these figures to Trump's reputation as a self-made businessman, which was a key talking point in his campaign.
The Times said they never actually saw these documents themselves, but they were able to verify the information, which was from an anonymous source with legal access to the files. These are not the same as President Trump's tax returns, which Democrats have called him to release since his 2016 campaign. Trump's lack of transparency about his returns breaks the tradition of U.S. presidents releasing their tax returns to the public.
At Northwestern, we're Wildcats in every way.
Go Northwestern, break right through that. With our colors flying, we will cheer you all to go. Go you Northwestern, fight for victory, sweet victory, for the fame of our fair name, and go Northwestern, win that game. Go Cats!
At Northwestern University, we are pioneering innovation and achieving excellence across every imaginable discipline. Western University, the possibilities are endless.
Here at Politicat, we know firsthand that the news never stops, so we've pulled together a couple of stories you might have missed this week. 34-year-old Tammy Jackson gave birth last month. There were no doctors or hospitals. In fact, she was alone in a jail cell in Broward County, Florida. According to public defenders, jail personnel knew Jackson, who is mentally ill, was full term. They say she began having contractions in the morning. The attorney said the staff attempted to contact an on-call doctor. Although the doctor couldn't be reached for nearly 4 hours, Jackson was not taken to a hospital. The baby was placed with an appropriate caregiver, and the sheriff's office has launched an investigation.
Over the weekend in Sri Lanka, police say they discovered a 10-acre camp where Islamist extremists are believed to have trained. It is suspected that the terrorists involved with the Easter bombings are linked to this training camp. The Islamic State claimed responsibility for those deadly attacks, and the 2 owners of the plot of land have been arrested.
In most states, there still exists some sort of, quote, marital rape exemption, making it more difficult to prosecute a spouse for rape. But several state governments are looking to close this loophole. In Minnesota this week, legislators voted to eliminate the spousal protections for when a victim is incapacitated. In Ohio, 2 attempts to introduce a marital rape bill have failed, but determined lawmakers plan to reintroduce the bill this month.
Earlier this year, Brunei said it would impose the death penalty on those caught having gay sex. Earlier this week, however, the Sultan said he would impose a moratorium on the capital punishment. For now, death by stoning will no longer be the punishment for gay sex or adultery. Human rights organizations say LGBT citizens in the small Asian kingdom could still face fines, whipping, or jail time.
And to end our panel on a fun note, switching gears, we're playing our favorite game, Head Lies. We'll read you 3 headlines. 2 of them are fake, 1 of them is real. You figure out which one you think is serious. Ready? First, a new study that analyzed statistics from 2019 April Fool's pranks in cities across the country revealed that if you're from Chicago, you're 3 times more likely to fall for a prank than if you're from Cleveland. Second, Kirsten Gillibrand's campaign premiered a new ad that features her playing water pong. And finally, only hours ago, Trump announced plans to invite Putin and Kim Jong-un to the White House on the same weekend in mid-June.
I might go with the first one.
First one.
I think the second 2 sound plausible, unfortunately, actually, for the last one, but I would go with the first one as fake.
Okay, the first one was the April Fool's
pranks,
study.
yeah.
Okay.
No, 2 of them are fake. 1 of them is real. You have to pick
one
the
is
real
real.
one.
Oh.
Yes,
Oh,
yes.
I thought,
you have to pick the
okay.
real one.
I thought you were.
You have to
one?
pick
Oh,
the real
God.
one. Only one is true.
Sorry, it's like 2 truths and a lie, but
Okay,
inverted.
I'll go with Gillibrand then. Hopefully
Okay.
the third one's not real.
I'm also going with Gillibrand. Her campaign isn't going so well, so I'm thinking that's pretty par for the course for her.
Yes, you are both correct. We were going to be really sneaky and say beer pong and have that be a false one, but you got it. Very impressed.
All right, we're going to try again. Here's round 2. First, after a lone squirrel wandered onto the red carpet during yesterday's Met Gala, several fashion designers discreetly asked gala organizers for stronger ground surveillance. Second, TSA officers in Juneau were suspicious of a bag of, quote, organic mass, which turned out to be a sack of moose poop. The owner told the agents he collects them and likes to present the packages to politicians. And finally, this afternoon, President Obama said he plans to formally endorse a Democratic candidate for president by the end of the month. Which one is true, Edmund?
I'm going to go with the moose poop.
Moose
one.
poop?
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah, I think that's...
James,
that's
you have a second on moose poop, or you disagree?
What was the first one again?
The first one is of the lone squirrel on the red
I'm
carpet.
gonna go the lone squirrel. The Met Gala is a crazy place. I think that.
I like how you all say
happened.
gala. I say
Gala.
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 I like
don't know. Gala.
Well, the true one was, in fact, Juneau, Alaska. The man's carrying around moose poop
Wow.
and trying to deliver it to politicians.
2 for 2.
Yeah, 2 for 2 for Edmund. Edmund's the winner tonight.
Yeah, very.
I'm batting 500. It's still.
I don't think I'd want to be on that plane.
It's Alaska. I don't know what's going on up there.
Okay.
All right, we're gonna have to leave it right there. Thanks for playing along with us, and we'll be right back.
At Northwestern, we're Wildcats in every way.
Northwestern break right through that. With our colors flying, we will cheer you all to go. Go you Northwestern, fight for victory, sweet victory, spread for the fame of our fair name, and go Northwestern, win that game. Go Cats!
At Northwestern University, we are pioneering innovation and achieving excellence across every imaginable discipline. At Northwestern University, the possibilities are endless.
One million species are at risk of extinction, according to a United Nations report on humanity's impact on biodiversity. The report, which came out Monday, warns that the environment is declining at, quote, unprecedented rates, and changes in the environment will put people at risk. Sir Robert Watson, chair of the committee that compiled that report, said, quote, we are eroding the very foundations of our economies, livelihoods, food security, health, and quality of life worldwide.
However, the United States government continues to seem unconvinced about the damage we as human beings are causing to our planet. On Thursday, the Trump administration rolled back offshore drilling safety rules created by the Obama administration after the BP oil spill in the Gulf of Mexico in 2010. The rule change is a big victory for the oil and gas industry, who say the rules were too strenuous and costly to comply with. But supporters of the rules say they have helped prevent another accident like the BP spill. The new rules reduce the frequency of tests to key instruments that help prevent large spills, allow drillers to use third parties rather than government inspectors and equipment checks, and allow for more time in between inspections.
The overwhelming nature of climate change can make reporting on it seem daunting. However, with this administration consistently denying climate change and calling it a hoax, accurately reporting on climate change and its effects is more important now than ever.
Our actions as humans for the past 2 centuries have been killing the planet, and now scientists have determined that we have only a few decades, a time period well within our lifespans, before climate change reaches catastrophic and irreversible levels. This UN report is only the latest in a series of reports that offers a grim look at the future of life on our planet, should we fail to change the way we treat our environment.
It is our responsibility as journalists to amplify these reports and make them known to the general public. It's our job to counter false narratives and continue to tell people climate change is real, and we have to change our ways. That's all the time we have for tonight. I'm Joey Safcha.
And I'm Justin Sweetwood. Thanks for watching.
I like your